Sky Howdy, and welcome back to another episode of World Bigfoot Radio. Big Sky Howdy, and welcome to another episode of World Bigfoot Radio with an amazing returning guest. And she just got back from doing a really cool investigation here earlier today. She was out doing some recon on something, and she's going to let us know about that right now, but she's also going to bring us up to date on all the other stuff that's been happening since the last time that we had her on the show. So with that, let me welcome back to the show Brenda Harvey-Harris. Welcome back, Brenda.
Hello. Thanks for having me back.
Always a pleasure to have you here, Duke. Duke loves having you on the show, and all of the fans love listening to you. And, you know, for folks that don't remember the last time she was on, which was quite a while ago, Brenda has her own group over there in the Southwest. And what's the name of your group there?
New Mexico Shadow Seekers.
New Mexico Shadow Seekers. And that is the name. You can find it on Facebook if you want to go check it out, which I highly recommend. Great group, very down to earth. Keeps up to date on things that are happening in her area all the time. She's always out there doing investigations and recons on areas where calls and reports are coming in from people are concerned. She gets the call, she goes and checks it out with her team and does just an awesome job. So heavily encouraged for all of you to go check out what she's got going on a regular basis, and she will be a regular reporter here on World Bigfoot Radio. But so let us know what you were doing today then.
Oh, well, I got a call. As a matter of fact, the call that I got from this young man was Friday, very late. Must have been about 9 o'clock in the evening when I got the call. This young man, he went out for a walk along the river, and he earlier in that day, that probably around, must have been about 3 o'clock is when he took off from his house, headed down to the river, and he had his little axe and his chainsaw. Well, he went down that way to go start chopping up some wood, and he wanted to make a bridge across this little ravine. So he thought he'd, go down in there, and he was by himself. And he went, and so he got to the area where he needed to get, started on chopping some wood. Well, he told me that he was there chopping, and he was there pretty late to dusk. He said that there's a little bit of clouds, in the sky, but it was sunny, and the sun's going down. That about sunset. He's like, well, he better start heading back on home. Well, he started heading home, and he put the chainsaw down on the ground there, and I believe he heard some noise or something. And he got up and he started walking, and he heard some branches breaking. And, just from talking and just listening to this young man, he could just hear like the tremble in his voice. He'd never seen a Bigfoot. Of course he would hear stories of it. And then also he was yelling in the area there along the rivers there. And, he never in his wildest dreams he, thought would ever come across one until that night. Well, he, a loud yell, he said that it sounded like a lady screaming. And it was very loud, and he, it really scared him, and he took off. Well, he set his chainsaw and his little axe down there on the ground, and then he heard something like branches breaking or something, and like something was following him.
Oh.
Just imagine, he just left, his chainsaw and his axe there, left it, and he took off, started running back home. And in this area where we went hiking down in there today, he showed us this area, and boy, I tell you what, it is like up and down, and there's some areas where we had to crawl to get into. Where he was showing that there was some bedding, which is what we found, some bedding down in there. There's one area where, like the runoff of water was running like a little stream. And in this little area there you can tell that there was something laying in there. And then there's also, we come across where there's huge, looks like slab of concrete that might have been dumped in that area down below. And you could see underneath these slabs, like there's something fairly good size, maybe something kind of small that could lay in there. So I took pictures of that. Took pictures of this one area where it looked like something laying in there. I tell you what, that area there, some areas is very thick. And, what crosses your mind is when you're in that area, being that it's so thick like that, how could something so big get in there and out of there without making so much noise? And the area is very rocky, it's hard to make out some prints. We did find some prints. The ones that I found on their hike today, they probably measured about 12 inches wide or long, and maybe little, some that were small. And the bigger ones, those ones, they seem to stay on the rock, very rocky areas. And so, like I said,
they're about hiding their tracks.
Oh, yeah. That's their advantage in places like that. People have, where's their tracks? And we don't see them. Well, this is their advantage right here. You see all these rocks, so run on that stuff. And they're like, okay, well, this young man, when he was taking us down in these areas, we'd go up and we'd climb up steep hills. And, inside of these, what do they call it, the little hills there, it's, really steep, and it's very slippery, too. And if you don't watch your step, you'll go sliding down. There's long, these are made perfect, like trails, just along the side of the hill there. And he said that night when he was running, he was like basically running for his life. He was so scared. He said, I never thought I would come across this. I never always hear about it, because it's like I just saw my life flash, in front of me. Like, oh my God, I got my kid, and I don't want to, I don't want this thing to grab me and kick off with me. I don't want this to be where I'm going to come up missing. Those things were coming to his mind as he was running, and this thing was following him back to his house. He said he ran, and, he ran across the field, showed us the area where he ran across the field. Just before he got to his house, there's one area where there's trees, and when he turned, as he turned, he said this thing was standing there, and he looked at me, and he says, Brenda, that thing was tall. He said it had to be about 12 feet tall. That is how big this thing is. He's like, he goes, I just got so scared. He goes, I ran, and all these things going through his mind. I don't want this thing to take me, and, just talking to him and seeing him, today in person, you just see that look in his eyes, that fear and the scared, and listening to his talk, his voice, is really like shaky, he's just standing there still, like in disbelief, like I just can't believe this thing was running right after me. I heard that one from further down when he first heard the one that sounded like a lady screaming out loud just over the next hill there. Then he hears this other one like down below as he was running. He was like running at the same time he was moving, and when he'd stop, it stopped. Well, like I said, just before he got to his house, I'm going to say about maybe 100 yards away from his house, between 100 and 150 yards away from his house, is where this thing, when he was running, he turned back and looked, and that's where he saw this thing stand up. He said the color of it was black, and I asked him if he had got to see the face. What did the face look like? I didn't get to see the face, I saw the eyes. The eyes had like a really bright, not yellow, but like a gold color. It's almost like a rich gold, it was really, you could just see it. And he was, that's all I could see was the eyes, and it was looking right at me. He started running again, and he turned around. This thing was so close, getting closer to him. He's like, for me, I was like running, so hard, and it seemed like this thing only took maybe 2-3 steps, and is almost right behind him. And one last time before he crawled over the fence, he looked again, and there it was. This thing just watched him, and it just looked at him, and he ran back into the house and told his cousin, called his brother and told him what had happened. And he said that he was so scared, and he literally started crying because, that's how scared he was, because I didn't want that thing to take me. He just started thinking about his family, as he was running, trying to get back home. And at one point when the second to the last fence was a barbed wire. He said that when he jumped over that fence, his finger, the barbed wire caught his finger and cut his finger, and he had blood all over his hand. He was, or scratched, where the barbed wire caught his skin, and he was trying to get over that fence before that, before the Bigfoot got any closer to him. And he leaped over that, and of course he got, like I said, cut his hand on that barbed wire, and got back close to his home there. And I asked him what color was this, did you shine a light on him, or her, or male, whatever it is, He said no. He goes, I didn't have a flashlight, I didn't have my phone on me, my phone died or whatever. And, it was kind of dark because I could see that outline. It was so big. It was that thing, it ran so fast, it was just like behind him. And it's like, well, I was just like running for my life. I was so scared, and then I made it home and got home and told my brother, and he called his cousin, and they came over, and they had to basically calm him down, and he was just so scared, and that's when he called me around 9 o'clock, and told me everything that had happened. And later on that night, as I was talking to him, my phone had just went out on me. And so my phone finally came back on. And it must have been about 10:30, close to 11. He texted me, and he said, my chainsaw, because I left my chainsaw and my axe down there. And he said that, because I could hear my chainsaw, can they start the chainsaw? I said, these things watch the people. They watch us humans. Everything that we do, they imitate what we're trying to do, what we do. And I told him, it could have started it. I don't know. Because I can hear my chainsaws going off. Because I just called the cops. And they said they're going to come and check, And I told them, I said, okay. So let them know what's going on, and let them know that, something has your chainsaw down there, and it's going off. And so he said that later on that night, probably about an hour goes by, I asked if the cops showed up, and said, no, they haven't showed up yet. I said, okay, so I'll just, keep me informed and let me know. So, yes, Saturday, which was yesterday on the 17th, I had a message, and we was going to go do the hiking yesterday, but he was so tired. He only had like 2 hours sleep the night before because of what had happened. He was so worked up and, scared and everything. And so I got to meet him today on the 18th here on Sunday. We did the hike, and he showed me exactly where he went and where the first yell happened. And, just looking at him and just listening to him, his voice had so much tremble. He was so scared. It's like I was running for my life. I was so scared. I never thought I would ever, come across one just standing right there, looking at me. That's a life change, because I look at things differently now, because that was very scary. But I'll never go back down in there by myself again. And I'm not going to do it because, And that's what I had a really good long talk with him and his brother. Shared a lot of things with them, and we're going to go back down there, and we're going to check out some other areas down in there, some other things that were found. And on our hike down in there, we did find some bones. We actually found also the horse's head, the skull, that was underneath some brushes there. So we took several pictures of those. So I'll send those to you so you can show those, Brian. Also found some footprints as well in that area, some small and big ones. The big ones were really hard to make out because of the rocks.
Right.
The smaller one, the one that fairly came out good was the stat size, I believe, was about the 12 and a half size of the footprint. Also came across some really child-sized footprints too as well. No, this young fellow, he's very, very shook up about what he experienced on Friday evening. And so, like I said, meeting him today was, you just see that look in his eyes, it's just, he's just like very terrified, like, I just can't believe it, I'm glad I made it home, And when he got home, his brother's like, he was in tears, literally in tears because of what he experienced, and it was very scary for him.
I guess.
So,
Yeah, I mean, if most people live a life of, well, even if you're in an area where other people talk about it and you hear stories about it and stuff, if you haven't actually seen anything like that, you can still convince yourself that, it's not really real, that's not part of the real world or anything. And then when it actually happens, it just crashes in on you so hard, it's like, no, that is part of the real world. There it is.
Yeah.
And it changes just everything, the way you look at everything. It's super traumatic. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not an aggressive encounter, super traumatic. And it sounds like this guy got yelled at and chased, and maybe Bigfoot doesn't want him over there cutting wood in that particular spot because he got a hard time of it, it sounds like.
Yeah. You never know. He's like, why? Are they aggressive? Are they mean? I said, some are mean and some will attack, And those are the stories that, that people don't want to hear because all these, many researchers out there, they're nice and, we leave gifts and stuff like that. Be careful with that. I don't leave gifts, I don't want to take that chance because if there's homes close by and you're leaving gifts there, you got to think about all these other people, the neighbors. Why is this thing coming up? But only you know because you left gifts there. And if those gifts aren't there, guess what? They're going to go to all these other people's homes. Okay, where's my gift at? And these people are wondering, why is this thing coming around my place? I don't want it here. Why all of a sudden is it coming here? Well, they don't know that there's some other individual over here that's something for it, and, that's why I don't leave gifts. I had that, something like that has happened in our area, and the lady was leaving gifts, and the same got mad because this lady went on vacation and came back, and her whole backyard was all messed up. Things were thrown over because there was no food left before it. So I went down to the next neighbor's house looking for food. Like, hey, we got Bigfoot over here. Why is it coming over here? Well, looking for food. That's number one reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's why I'm against feeding it. Leave it alone. If you go back, there's fish in the river. They can go, fish over there,
Yeah.
So, that's, you have to be really careful with that stuff. And why it started chasing this individual, who knows? Like you said, maybe it didn't want it to the trees down in that particular area. It could be because also that female was over there on the other side of the hill. There is yelling and screaming. And probably did that because they had a young one in there too. Like I said, I found some really small footprints. And these things are very protective of their young ones. and they
Well,
will
that
chase
could be
you out
it,
of
too.
there.
You got a family living there. They're going to be really protective of their territory. Hey,
Oh,
we got
yeah.
youngsters here. You know, and the other thing is, too, it was like you said, it was late in the day. How close to dark was it when he was out there? Was it dark, actually?
It was getting dark. He said it was about 7 o'clock, so it was getting dark. I had asked him if it was it dark or was it like just at dusk, or he goes, no, it was dark. So he had apparently must have been the moonlight. He had enough lighting somehow to see how big this thing was, how tall it was.
Right.
And he said the color of it was black. That was the only dark image standing there. He goes, I could make out the the body lines. The eyes, he goes, the eyes is what caught my attention, because they were just like bright, gold.
Amber.
There you go. Yeah. He goes, I'd never seen anything not like that,
Did it sound to you like it was eye shine off of whatever light was coming off the sky, or was like eye glow?
He said eye glow.
Really? Wow, creepy.
Yeah. He said it was big. He goes, and when he saw it, when he turned to look at it, when it was walking, he goes, it just had just like what they show, in those Bigfoot shows, how it swings its arms, side by side as it's walking. He said that's exactly how it looked as it was walking.
Well, one little detail that sticks out on this one to me, Brenda, is something that I'm sure you've encountered a bunch of times, and I've sure heard it tons of times, and that's if you're in an area where they're around at night and they're not used to it, and you start making a big racket, they get mad about it. Blasting loud music, firing guns, playing with a chainsaw, cruising around on a dirt bike, all this kind of stuff. And I've heard the same thing over and over again. Everything was just fine until we started making a racket, and all of a sudden, bad response.
Yeah. Yeah, and when it comes to something like that, it's because they're very close. They're very close to where they're staying, and they don't want to be found in that area. Therefore, this is exactly pretty much why it happened to this young fellow. He didn't realize, and he didn't know that they were going to be over there on that side where he just happened to be at. So he thought just chainsaw, and probably the male is the one that came forward and started looking to see where this young man was. Maybe that's why he got chased out of there. This thing started, following him. And so, it could just be really a number of things, But I kind of think it would be that, because like you said, you heard that one that sounds just like a female screaming just over the next hill there. And he's like, oh my God, what is that? And the next thing he hears is heavy footsteps coming. You're like, oh. Then he got scared, and he goes, I tried to look like chainsaw in the dark, and he goes, I know I left it right here, and he just forget it. And the reason why he wanted to grab his chainsaw was to start it up and really rev it up to scare it off.
Which might have just made it matter, considering all of that already. I don't know. I would have probably grabbed the axe and ran away. It's probably what I would have done.
Yeah. But, that's what happened Friday evening on the 16th, a couple of days ago. He was really, really, really shook up young man. So, I'm going to be going, I'll be heading back out there to talk to them some more, to him and his brother, and they want to share with me some other things, pictures and all. And he showed me some footprints that he'd come across too. So there were some pretty good pictures. So I'll send those, with to you. So you can add to this. But that's what I did today. So I'll be heading back up to do some more looking into in that area.
So just the usual fun-filled day for Brenda and the research team.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty much.
Somebody's terrified out of their wits. Bigfoot chased them out of the woods. Let's go check it out. Oh, my God, these poor people. I'm so glad there is somebody down there like you that can actually go look at this and, give them an idea what the heck is going on at least. And, because when they're operating with no knowledge of it whatsoever, the whole thing is just ultra terrifying. It really helps to have somebody that knows something about it that can go, well, it's probably not doing this, and it might have done this for this reason. And, if you don't have to be ultra terrified, it would be nice to know why you don't have to be ultra terrified.
Yeah, right.
On the other hand, if you've got like a 12-foot dog man around your cabin, maybe you should stay ultra terrified. Yeah, the whole eye shine and eye glow thing is really interesting to me. I hear so many different details on that and different encounters and stuff. It'd be really, really fun if we could get to the bottom of that one at some point. But until then, one of the things that I caught on your Facebook group was an investigation you guys were doing where you had a game cam set up and you actually had gotten some cool pictures on there. You remember which one I'm talking about? You want to talk about that
I
one?
believe so. Is that the one where at the left-hand corner you can see this big black figure move?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, there was a whole investigation leading up to this and everything, too. This is another good example of Brenda's New Mexico recon team going out there and doing a good job with it. So if you want to tell us about that, I'd love you to share that story.
Sure. We had gotten a call, about this area. And I'm always, this particular area, people are always hearing this, they're hearing the Bigfoot yell. And when it yells, it yells. There was, last summer, I was visiting one of my my new members that I recruited to help us out. He was telling me that they had heard a yell that they've never heard before. It was so loud that everybody that lived in that block area there, everybody's house packed, the porch, backlight, everybody turned their lights on. That's how loud this thing yelled, and everybody's flashing their lights, in the backyard, like, what the heck is that? He's standing there, and all these lights are going on behind these houses, the porch lights. People are shining their lights in the backyard, and, they heard this thing yell. And, he said that was one loud yell. That scared, I believe, a couple of families. And these two families, they ended up moving out of there. And they're like, this is just crazy. This is scary. Whatever's out there shouldn't be out there. And, he got to talking with this individual and told him, we're moving out of here. This is really scary. Because that was way too close to these homes, to our home. And so, from what I understood, this family was going to be moving out of there probably back in, I think it was in August or September. But they were going to be moving out of there. Another family, this thing yelled again, and they're like, we're out of here. They were going to just pack their stuff and get out of there.
That's got to be really scary to just, only hear the noise a couple times and go, okay, that's it, we're moving.
Yeah, because this thing's been yelling in this area for quite some time now. It's probably, let's see, I'd probably say for several years. And last summer was probably the most intense yell that a lot of people in that area have heard. There's a gentleman that has, about 2 weeks ago, this gentleman, he has sheep down in that area. And they said, man, here's dogs, and neighbors' dogs were going nuts. I mean, they were just barking like something was out there. And this gentleman that owns these sheep, he could hear something, really bothering the sheep, a lot of scuffle going on in the sheep corral. They got his gun and starts, shooting. And you could hear gunshots going off. And I think the Bigfoot must have been in the corral trying to get one of the sheep there. And so they said he noticed that he also put up lights. And this is one thing, that I stress to the people. You have livestock, any kind of livestock, and if they're in the corral, get some light up,
Yep.
But even though you put the lights up, be careful because they're starting to come out more in the light too, so be really careful and be aware of that. But the more light you can get up, the better, because they don't like that light. But still be careful anyway. But, so that's what happened about 2 weeks ago when the gentleman, she was trying to get Grandma. I don't know if it took one or not, but the guy started shooting. Every now and then we could hear gunshots going off down in that area. And this is probably not too far from where I live. And so, yeah, every now and then I'll hear gunshots going off. Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's the neighbor shooting at Bigfoot again. God, what a neighborhood. No thanks. I like my boring neighborhood here. I only have to go about 3 miles to go find where the local Bigfoot are. That's close enough. And they're really friendly and don't bother you.
There's also another family that I'm working with, very close with. She's having this thing that comes constantly, almost on a regular basis, where this thing is bothering her horses, and their horses were a little bit they came close to the river, and they ended up having to move their corral closer to the house because this thing was bothering the horses and scratching them, and she just fed up with it, this has just got to stop. And some of the claw marks or scratch marks that it left on the horse, some of the wounds, one of the wounds on the front legs is pretty kind of bad. And about last month, or let's see, February, January, probably in I'd say that maybe the last week of December into January, this thing came back to the house, and it got into the corral. I'm sure it got into the corral, and it just like really entwined the horse's hair. I mean, it was tightly twisted, and she tried to for quite some time to unravel that, and she found scratch marks, deep marks on the legs. And I'm like, okay. So we had, I had set up the game cam, set up several of them around her home. And I had left it out there for about maybe a month, and went through the pictures and all. And there's a picture where there's several pictures where you could see, like, it was really close to the camera. You could see, like, the hair standing out. So I'll be posting those. And then also, there's one picture that it got so close to the camera, like it was looking at the camera as it was walking by. It was moving so fast, it took the picture. And you could see a face there. But you could, when I downloaded the SD card, and, pictures, of course, they come out bigger on the laptop, right? So when I came across this picture, it's kind of hard to make out, but you can see the nose, you can see the eyes, and it's like you can see the weeds in the background, but it's only because it went by the camera so fast and boom, it took the picture. But when you look at the picture from a distance, you can clearly see the face. So I'll be doing like a side-by-side. Here's it'll be the original picture, and then here's the other picture that I'll just like take a picture off the deal there and put it by saying this is what it is. And so
that's why you're a pro squatter. You do the comparison pictures. Nice job.
Yeah. Yep. And so, like I said, also took some pictures of, like hairs and some, like the side of the face possibly, but maybe just caught the hair. And then also about, let's see, probably about 2.5 weeks ago, she had called me one night, and I was on a Saturday night, I believe it was. She called, she left a message, and I've been having issues with my phone. It just goes off and comes on. So I didn't hear my phone go off. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning when she was texting me, and I didn't hear the dang thing go off. Well, I got up next morning to check my phone, and there's all these messages. And this thing came back to her house that night, and she had a couple of wheelbarrows right by the front door, and they had some wood in there. She said that thing just came over. And she said, I don't know what this thing was doing. It must have got mad or something, and it just turned over her wheelbarrows, throwing things around in her front yard. And that really scared her that night, that night. And it also turned over some other things that were in front of the house, too. And, she was just like, and she just got really dealing. That was just way too close to them. The wheelbarrow was right by the front door. And you said we could just hear this thing just, I don't know, was mad or what, but it just started turning things over. And this is the same lady that's having the problems with it bothering her horses. And, she said, we can hear it yelling. And I don't know, what's going on with it. That was a really scary night. And then about probably 2 weeks later, she had got off work, and she was getting closer to her home, and she seen these two bright lights in front of her door. And I had set up one of my game cams there, a video camera, and I faced it towards the front door because it seems to keep going in front of the house and moving around. So she said they were from her husband were coming back. It was late at night. It was probably about 12:30 in the morning, between 12:30 and 1. As they were getting closer to their home, they seen this two bright lights like in front of their door. When they got to the gate to open the door, the lights disappeared and it was gone. So they drove in. And then they went to the back of the house. They went to go check on the horses. When they were checking on the horses to the west of them, they heard the dogs, the neighbor's dogs in the field barking like they were barking at something. And she said that so we flashed the lights down that way. And she goes, we could see the dogs. They're like, what are they barking at? And, well, they were running away from Bigfoot. Bigfoot was chasing the dogs. When they shined the light in the field, there was Bigfoot. And they said they shined the light on it, and they could see the red eyes. And they said, oh, my God, there it is. It's running after the dogs, chasing the dogs. And she yelled out and like, hey, She said that it, stopped, looked her way, and it just started back down towards the river. Took off back down towards the river. Get out of here, just leave us alone, leave it alone, And she took off, they were all looking around, and the dogs made back to their home. And the Bigfoot ran back down towards the river. I had asked her, I said, about if it had come back. That was the next morning when I contacted her. Did it come back after, it was chasing those dogs? She said that it did come back later on, and you could just hear it. I believe it was yelling, she said, in the field there. The dogs were just barking like crazy. And she's like, I don't know what the deal is with this one, but there's several of them in that area. It's not just the one. And so we have that going on in that area. Sounds
like you got kind of a bad-tempered one over there, wanting to mess with everything, molest the horses, chase the dogs around.
Yeah, it's like, these things they're starting to get even more aggressive. It's like, but a lot of people, not doing anything really, and boom, this thing is just one is just
yeah, and they hurt people indirectly too, like you were talking about with the first story where the gentleman jumped over the barbed wire fence and cut his finger on it. I had a friend that got chased down the backside of Mount Sentinel up here in Montana by apparently 3 of them. Sounded like they were smaller ones, so juvenile delinquents probably. but he only could really see out of one eye, and it was after dark, and after dark his vision goes down to absolutely nothing. So even though he'd been up there elk hunting and had a rifle with him, he couldn't do anything with it in the dark because he couldn't see anything. And apparently these things figured out, as soon as it got dark and he started bumbling into things, he can't see. And they chased him all the way down the backside of the mountain until he finally ran into a barbed wire fence that he couldn't see and ripped the living hell out of his legs. He was like shredded, bleeding to death. And walking down an access road when a car came by and picked him up and took him to the hospital. But he heard something actually following him right up to the point where the lights of that car came around the turn, and then he heard it run back into the woods again. So, interesting stuff to note there, too.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Just, it was today's Sunday, Friday, it must have been Thursday night. Was it Thursday night or Friday? I'm trying to think here. Thursday night or Friday night. No. What's interesting, Friday night, after I talked to the young man, about an hour later here at my home, at our home here, you could just smell. I could just smell that bad smell. I'm like, okay, it's here.
Yeah.
So I told my husband, I said, hey, this thing's here. And I said, it smells bad. I mean, you could smell it in the house. That's how bad the odor was. And it was, I don't know if it was like walking on the east side of the house, which it might have been in the field there, walking. And probably about 30 minutes later, after we shut down everything, turned the lights off, like we were going to bed, and I just kind of was listening out, and boy, that smell was just, it was lingering, and I'm like, okay, it is here, out here. And we have this little dog, and he's sleeping underneath the window here in our bedroom, and he starts really growling, like towards the window on the east side of our house. We have a window, and he was just laying there, and he started growling. It was the first time I ever heard this little dog growl. And I'm like, okay, it's got to be just right out here, by the tree, by our house or something. But that smell was bad. It stayed, probably lingered here for about almost an hour. And then all of a sudden it was gone. And I'm like, okay, it's out here somewhere. And, when that happens, the dogs are outside. They're really quiet, of course. And the neighbor's horses, they start acting up, and they'll start snouting and running around in the crowd. And I was just listening out, and, I'm like, okay, it must have moved on. It must have probably headed back, either back down towards the river or headed to the south up there on top of the hill. So it's like, okay, it's around again. So every now and then, we'll get that smell. Over last summer, this thing, it tapped on our bedroom window on the east side. At that time, we didn't have running water in our home here, and we had to go outside. We had this other little small trailer outside that has the water, and so we would wash up in there. And my husband had to go out. It was about 2:00 in the morning, so he had to go take care of business. And he comes back in, and he goes, Brenda, it's here because I can smell it. It's outside. I said, okay. So I got him, kind of looked around. But right after he told me that, I said, yeah. I said, as soon as you walked out that door, I said, it tapped on the window. I said, so it's right here somewhere on the east side of the house. And that really spooked him.
Yeah, no kidding. I wouldn't be too happy about that either.
He got the gun out. He was like, okay, if it's going to do that, if it's going to bust that window, I've got my gun right here, But it did. It tapped on the window. And that pretty much scared me. And I just sitting up and was just listening, kept listening to see if we hear anything, see if it would do it again. Did it like twice. And after that, when he came in and he told me that smell, I was like, yeah, I said, it just tapped on the window. And, he's like, I'm getting the gun. So when he got the gun and got it ready just in case. And so, I listened out and I didn't hear anything. And, of course, the dogs were really quiet, The dogs get really scared when it comes around the house. And probably about 15 minutes later, that's when the dogs, they just all started going nuts, barking. I'm like, okay. When that happens, I know that it's walked off either back down towards the river or back up into the hills on the south side of us. And so, yeah, I really listen to the animals, especially the horses. When I look out the back window, and if I see that horse now, I'll open the door and I'll stand out there. And if I see that horse mountain, okay, it's back there in that field there. And so I'll hear them or hear the dogs going crazy or the coyotes down at the down the river. They go off quite a bit, and once they go off, I'm like, okay, here it comes. It's coming. So those are things that I really listen to, and I'm like, okay, he's coming up in one of the fields here in the back. So those are like my warning signals. That's what I listen to when they come.
Warning signals. Big D was talking about that on the last episode. Yeah, everybody thought there was something wrong with the dogs in the neighborhood because every night about the same time they'd all start barking in one direction. And it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with the dogs in the neighborhood. There was something wrong with the humans. Dogs are doing their job. You guys weren't figuring out what they were barking at.
Yeah. No,
yeah,
if people would listen to their animals, they're warning you. They're like, okay, hey, so something's here. For me, I really listen, but the animal that I really watch and really listen to is those horses.
Yeah.
Once I start seeing them horses and hearing the horses snouting and start kicking and running in circles, I'm like, okay, it's really close by. And I'm like, okay, it's here. And so that's the animal that I really listen out to. My cats, I have quite a few cats running around here, strays that running around here. Once they usually huddle in the back on the porch, and when I open that door and they're not there, they're in hiding. They won't come outside in the morning. So I know that it's a
smart
when
cat.
I don't see them out.
Yeah, some people's cats aren't that smart to know not to hide right away. They disappear.
I'm going to share this one with you real quick. Long time ago when I was at the age of, must have been 8 or 9, we used to live in the Farmington area, and we used to live in this trailer court, and we were probably about maybe a mile, it had to be the south from the river at that time. And late at night, because during the summertime, we would even have our bedroom window open, and all of a sudden we would hear this long scratch. And you know how some of the mobile homes are made, the outside walls are like metal.
Yeah.
And when you hear that scratch, you hear that, it was like a long scratch along that, underneath the window. And boy, we would jump up, me and my brothers, and my sisters, we'd run into our mom and dad's room. Something just scratched the trailer. Something's out there. We did this quite a bit. And we didn't know what it was. And we get up the next morning and we go look outside, and there's claw marks on the side of that our home. And we're like, what is that? And it would come back, and it would do it again, and we'd be so scared. We're like, you go look out that window, see who it is. Maybe someone just trying to scare us or something. But I remember that. And there was one night we had a small kitten, and we had all fell asleep. And the next day we woke up, like, oh man, the cat. We forgot to bring our kitten in. And whatever was out there, it scratched the side of the trailer again. And the first thing that came to my mind was, the cat, where's the cat? We all started looking for the cat. And we found the cat. And that our poor cat, it was in front of our trailer, we had this tree. This baby kitten was like, it looked like it was trying to hurry and run up the tree. And the cat, you could see that his claws was clawed into the tree. It was dead. And whatever was out there scared that cat to death, and it was stuck on that tree. I mean, its claws, his eyes, I remember the eyes were open wide, and the mouth was like, open too, like it was trying to maybe cry out loud or something. I mean, it just had that really scared look about him when we found that cat. It was clawed. That cat was so scared to death that it died clawed into the trees. His nails were like in the tree, like it was like it was trying to run up the tree to possibly hide up there, but it didn't make it all the way up. It died on the tree. I'm like, oh my God, I said, what happened? We're like, what was that? That what is that that's coming? And I remember my dad says that it's got to be maybe it's a skinwalker. That was the first thing that came to his mind was the skinwalker. And I'm like, no, we're all like, I don't think so, because this thing is, scratching and underneath our bedroom window. And then there was a couple nights later, it also did it sounded like some kind of a growl and scratching along the side. Went all the way underneath our bedroom window on the east side of the window. And then more scratches were on the west side of the trailer underneath that window too as well. So I remember that when we were going up in in that area. Then, well, what is that? At that time, at a young age, just like there's a monster, a monster's out there. What is that? And we just start closing our windows late at night, and and we'd run to our mom and dad. Something's out there, it's scratching the trailer, and he'd go check it, it'd be gone, and that was scary. It really was. We didn't know what it was.
Yeah, that sounds mighty scary to me. No thanks. Wow. What do you think it was? Do you think you had a dog man there, or what do you think?
I don't know. It's really hard to say. At a young age, you're just thinking it's a monster.
Yeah, you don't even know different kinds of monsters. You're just like, it's a monster.
Yeah. And you're a little kid, you're like, that's a monster. That's all we know at that time is a monster. But,
God.
You go back and think now, like, was it really? Could it have been a Bigfoot, too, coming from the river? Mm-hmm. Who knows? You just don't know. So when there was a lady not too long ago, I believe maybe a week ago, had posted, do Bigfoots come in like trailer parks? My answer to that is I would say yes. Why would they come to a trailer park? For one thing, they're looking for food. Right now, they're hurting for food. So now they're coming to homes. They come up with animals missing. If you leave cat food, dog food, that's where they'll know to go hit the homes, because they leave them out. If you don't want it around, get that stuff put up. So it can go elsewhere. So what like I said, I would have to say yes, they do come through the mobile home parks, and see if your trash can's been tipped over. If you're wondering why, it could be possibly that they're going through trash, looking for the food. Leftovers, whatever's been thrown in there, they'll take and eat.
Yeah, it's the hungry time of the year. They're low on food to eat.
That's right.
Very interesting. Yeah, I can see that happening, actually. They're if they're that hungry, they definitely would make use of any kind of food sources like that, other than, and all the pet food that was left outside, and any garbage that seemed smelly, yummy, edible, and the pets, and, whatever else. Opportunist.
Yep. There's a lot of sightings going on still, along the rivers here, up in the mountains as well. People hear it yelling. As a matter of fact, there was a gentleman that went to go get some wood, and he started cutting, and as he was cutting, all of a sudden this rock comes flying towards him, almost hits him, I believe. And he's like, what the heck? And he turned around, and this thing was watching him. It was standing right behind the tree. And when he saw that, they said he just threw his chainsaw truck, and he hightailed out of there. He's like, oh, that
yeah,
thing
that's it.
standing right there, you know. He's like, oh, I'm out of here, you know. So he took off. Another incident happened pretty much almost the same way as when a young, I think it's the dad and the son, I believe, they were going up into the mountain. And he said not even halfway into the mountain, they started hearing yells. And this was 9 o'clock in the morning, around 9. He said they were going up and they heard something, so they rolled down the window and they said this thing was yelling. And they said they kept going up. The more they would go up, the louder the yells would get, because, you know, they were going up there to go haul, make a wood haul. Mm-hmm. And they said when they heard those yells, they said, forget that, you know, they turned back around and they got out of there. And that scared them. They said that was like in the morning. Like, what is this thing doing out early in the morning, you know?
Well, that's really brave. You don't usually hear them doing stuff like that.
Yeah, you know, and I told them, I said, you know, be careful because they're starting to come out during the day, you know, morning time, daybreak there, and they're starting to come out, so be really careful. He said, yeah, those yells were really scary. He said they were really loud. Like, wow. And so, but, you know, we still have a lot of sightings and some activity going on around here in our areas. Also up in the mountain, all along the rivers. And I'm getting quite a few reports of it too. So that's what's going on out here. You know,
that sounds like plenty. You're probably skipping a bunch of other stuff that's happened since.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's so much. You know, it's just like, wow. You know, people are like, oh yeah, they hibernate like bears. You know, I'm like, no, they're not bears. They don't hibernate. No, they're out and about still.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, wow. So you know that's.
I think up here, you know, judging up here by up north by how little they seem to move during the winter, and the actual accidental sighting by a hunter who ran into a pile that apparently they had piled up for the winter. Once it gets cold enough that things are fairly well freezable, they can just, you know, if you think about it, they can ambush a whole herd of deer, kill all of them, throw them all in a big heap somewhere near their cave and not have to go anywhere for months. And there's their food supply. It won't rot. Mm-hmm. You want it thawed out, bring it further into the cave where it's 45 degrees. There, it's thawed out.
Wow.
So, you know, I sometimes think about that. There was this hunter that was going through this. This was like late fall, early winter. It was already really cold. It was like late into the hunting season. I think it was over in the east somewhere. I'm not sure. But he was following this trail, and it sort of went into this little box canyon. And it was a deer trail, or deer, whatever it was that he was trailing. I think it was a deer. And the trail just kind of ended. And he was like, well, where'd the deer go? There's no deer turned around, went back the other way. There's no place where he could have got out of here. So he got curious, and he went up, climbed up to this, you know, practically cliff up to the top. I guess it was a ways up, you know, it wasn't like hundreds of feet or anything, but 30, 40, 50 feet, something like that. Got up to the top of it, where there's trees and stuff up there, and right there was like a big heap of dead deer and whatnot that had all just been killed somehow and were left there in a big pile. Like, I think you could draw your own conclusions what was going on there, but they all had like heads twisted around backwards, and they're all frozen nice and solid and just kind of piled up there.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's like, okay, well, here's the spot that we can lure all the dumb deer into where they won't get out again. We can grab them and just kill them and throw them in this heap up here, and we'll all be frozen. And it was kind of all the further we really need to go. We can keep chasing them into this canyon every so often, catch more of them. So, and then some of these other sightings, there was one up in northern Minnesota where they just randomly ran across like the longest Bigfoot trail ever recorded. It was miles long. And they were on snowmobiles, and they were making a new trail. They actually had chainsaws with them and were cutting deadfalls to make a new trail. They were out in the middle of this bog in the middle of nowhere, and here's this trail with these giant footprints. And when they followed it, it went west, then north, then east, then back south again, right up by the border where Canada is. And it seemed like it was just like basically doing a loop. Like, I'm going to go walk around the outer edge of my territory and see if anything was happening, sort of thing. 'Cause it was just basically going in a circle. And it ended up going into a swamp, and it was getting late at night. They're like, well, we're not stupid, and we're leaving now.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, I just kind of get the impression that especially in the colder areas, they probably just don't move around very much during the winter. You occasionally find tracks in the snow, but, it's just not that common, really. And I think the reason is because they're smart enough to know how to prep for winter. And if they're in an area where the winters are that bad, they've probably got a bunch of food piled up for it, and they just don't move very far.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, they... out here, we didn't get any snow out here this past December into now. Usually we have quite a bit of snow or even rainfall. It's really getting dry here. A lot of people, they was like, well, if there's a Bigfoot here, how come we don't find tracks? And you're saying it's right by the river, then where are the tracks? They use that river as a highway because they don't want you to follow them. So they're walking in the rivers,
Yeah.
And if you also were to look, once they come out of the river, look on the ground. If you see some, like these out here on the reservation, a lot of areas, there's weeds. They look like round, round weeds on the ground, that are round. If you were to look on that, you can clearly see sometimes they'll use that and walk on those. And you can see some really good foot impressions if you were to look down on that. The reason why they're walking on those weeds, those round weeds like that, is because they don't want to walk on the soft dirt, so you can find a track. Also gravel, that's their advantage. The river, the gravel, the weeds, they use those to their advantage to try and hide their footprints. They try not to walk on soft soil.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be followed. So
Absolutely.
Sometimes I've come across where some areas, like it's almost like they didn't have no choice to walk, but you could clearly see where they've taken a branch and they would turn around and swipe, almost like sweeping their footprints away.
Sweeping their track away, yeah.
That's right. Yep.
The picture I've managed to get so far of a really big track was a 19-inch track. It was right down on the edge of the Blackfoot River, and it was on a gravel park. And he had made like one mistake and stepped in a spot where it was a little bit too soft and actually left an impression, which I could see how he made the mistake because I couldn't leave any mark on anything in that area with my 240 pounds, not jumping on one foot. And this massive 19-inch track was like really obvious. It was like the only spot where there was like anything other than just rock that could have been compressed enough to actually leave a really obvious track. I'll include that for you guys to look at right here. But I went the same direction as that track was pointing, about 75, 80 feet, and I found a second track. And that's how good he was. Because like even though he was walking across this area, he only screwed up and left one actual track. And right behind what keyed me up to that track was there was two weird-looking impressions leading up to it that went across the soft spot. And I went back and looked at him and went, what the hell are these? And then after I looked at him for a while and I found the track, I went back and looked at him again. I went, if you ever tried walking on just your heels and having the front of your foot off the ground, that looks exactly like what he did. Here's a soft spot. Blip, blip. Oh, shit, that one was still soft. He put his foot down flat and left an impression on it. The third one.
That's true. But, too, you can also look, because they do go on all fours. A lot of people disagree, but I've had a lot of people.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Like, this thing moves like a gorilla. It'll do what sometimes they call as a knuckle walk. They'll do, look for the knuckles, some people have come across some knuckles, big knuckles, on the ground. You think, oh my God, it looks like they did what they call a knuckle walk. And I've come across some of those as well. I'm like, well, yeah, that's what he did. And so, people are like, yeah, where's really going? I thought it was walking, and all of a sudden it just disappeared. Well, it dropped down on all fours, and it got out of that area. And so, look at stuff like that, I never thought of that, like, yeah, they still do. They seem pretty smart.
They're sneaky, and they know what tracks are, and they know how to follow them, and they know that if they're leaving them.
Yep.
And that's part of the challenge here. It's not like trying to track an animal, like an ordinary dumb animal. This is somebody that actually knows what tracks are, will try not to leave them, may even sweep them clean behind them so as not to leave them. That
right.
sort of thing.
Yes, so true. One of my teammates, Hoyt Velarde, I was talking with him the other day, and he lives out there in Dorothy, and he's been telling me that they've been hearing it yell up there on top of the mesa there. And we got to talking about rock stacking and like branches on the ground, like possibly X's and stuff. And, kind of just getting each other's, seeing, which one, what he thought of, what he thought of, what I had, what my thoughts were on those two things, The rock stacking plus the wood, how a lot of people post the X's and stuff on the ground. I'm really careful with that. I don't just automatically jump me up, okay, that's a Bigfoot. On the branches, you have to be really careful because we can get high winds. And so therefore, whatever branches is on the ground, and then the ones that are falling off from the tree because of the wind, they'll land on the ground and they'll land right on top of the other branch. And sometimes they fall like an X. They'll land on top of each other, and sometimes it forms like an X. So I have to be really, really careful. I don't just jump to like, okay, that was done by Sasquatch. It may and it may not have been. You got to look at the wind, and those branches falling from how high to the ground. You got to look at all the other branches that's down on the ground already. And so what I really, really look into is how some of the branches, the bigger branches that are like may have been pulled down. Also, then there too, you've got to look at it could have been done by Sasquatch, kind of like how it bends a big old branch. How much snow does that area get? Because the weight of that snow can bend that branch.
Oh, for sure.
Now, this is where I look. Okay, I'll look at the other end. You got the main branch of the tree, the roots still in the ground. Now, the other end where, you got that bow, look on that other end. Is it twined? If it was twined with another branch, then okay, that might have been done by a squatch. Really look at it because they can entwine and tie really, really good with another branch. Again, humans, I don't know, it just depends on how tight it's been, twined together. Mm-hmm. Another one is when these trees, people come across what looks like a teepee or a hut. I look at the weaving, okay, and I've come across one just right off the road up in what do you call it, Payson area, about 2.5 weeks ago. And this was just off the main highway. I couldn't believe. I'm like, oh my God, look at that. I mean, it's just right. Here's the main highway. There's the fence. And I see this structure, which is almost like a teepee. That top, I mean, it was so like entwined. I was really surprised to see that. I'm like, wow. I don't know if you guys had heard just recently about the teepees that were made out here in the Santa Fe, New Mexico mountains out there, where they come across a lot of teepees. They look like teepees that were made. And,
is that what they're complaining? That they're like fire hazards and they were going to have to go take them down and quit doing this, whoever's doing it? Yeah, we'll send the memo to Bigfoot, dumbass.
Right. Right.
Bigfoot ain't watching your news broadcast, okay? There's your news flash.
I was like, wow, I thought, man, I wish I would have got down there and checked that out. But they had pretty much already taken it down and stuff, so.
Yeah. But the nice part of it is that Bigfoot will make more. So,
That's true. You never know. They were like, okay, he's making this. I'm like, okay, you guys going to arrest him? I'd like to see that.
I'll tell you what, if you find a huge one that's like decorated with bones and skulls next time, you'll know for sure who's doing it. And that the park rangers are really asking for it.
Yeah. Oh, no. But, I got to, I was talking to Hoyt about that, he was in agreement with me on that. And we started talking about the rock formation. And, they come across stacked rocks. And I asked him, what's your opinion on this one? I said, I'm really careful with that because, I've come across a lot of those up here in the Chicka Mountains. It could be done by humans, again. Maybe they're having like a family gathering. So they'll use the rocks like, hey, just follow my stack rocks with me. So, again, it could be, human. Also
there's rock stack markers and stuff, or trail markers and stuff. People still know how to do that. When you start seeing rock stacks that are made out of like rocks the size of a Volkswagen stacked on top of each other, then you might want to get a bit suspicious about it.
Yeah. That's true. But he was telling me that when was that? Maybe it was last summer, I think, or the year before. He's telling me that he was up in the mountains there, out in Dulce area, up in the mountains there. He was checking out an area, and he had come across me. I think he's either hiking or he was sitting in his truck or something. He just happened to pull over or something. I'll have to ask him right again. But he said that he looked in one direction. He's seen something small, and from a distance he's looking, and he's, that's a young juvenile Bigfoot sitting there. And he said that he saw this thing. It was stacked in rock on top of each other. So he goes, it was just like a little kid who was playing with the rocks, and he was stacking them. And he said it looked like it was there by himself. He goes, but I know better because I know that big one's around here somewhere. And he's watching the young one. I said, you're right. I said, it's close by. Because, that's one thing that I tell the people, even though it looks like the young one is there by himself, it's not. It's there. It's close by. There was
don't try and race over there on your ATV with your capture net. You're going to get in trouble.
Yeah. There's this young girl several years ago. I had shared this on another show, and she had contacted me, and she's was making her delivery, and this family happens to live close to the river, and she comes driving in and walks up to the house, and this family, they had some dogs. Well, when she opened her vehicle there and gets the package, just taking it to the door, as soon as the dogs jumped into the truck there, and she gets back to her. She's walking back to her delivery truck, and she left the package, and nobody wasn't there, so she turns around, and she starts walking back to the truck, and she just happens to notice something move in between the trees. And she got to look, it's like, what is that? So she started kind of making her way that way. And she said there was this small, and the color of it, the hair was reddish brown. She remembers, and she said that it had its back towards me, and it was sitting on the grass, and it was pulling up the grass, and it was eating it.
Huh.
And she's like, "That they don't have monkeys." And in her mind, she's like, "Is that a monkey?" And she's like, "No, they don't have monkeys." And so she was starting to get, wanting to get a better view of it. She starts walking that way, and then all of a sudden she hears this mean growl to the right side of her. She said that was, it was a mean growl. She's like, she never heard anything like that before. And so once she heard that growl, she turned around and she went back to her truck. She gets into her truck, and there's those two dogs in the truck, her delivery truck, and she tried to get them out. And those dogs are scared. She said those dogs are scared. They would not get out of her truck. She literally had to push them, those dogs out there, because they knew that the Bigfoot was there. And it was a young Sasquatch that was on that grass, and it was just pulling it. She said it was just pulling up the grass, and it was eating it. And I couldn't believe it. She was, it was about 5 in the evening when the sun was just starting to set. So she got a good look of the back of it. She didn't get to see the face of it, but she said the color of it was reddish brown. And that there was a mean growl right to the side of her as she was walking. She wanted to get a little bit closer to it. And, and I told us, if you ever see a young one like that, just stay clear, far clear from it, because the big ones, the adult ones, are there close to it. They not seem like it, but they're there watching.
Oh, same thing as you run into a grizzly bear cub or something. You don't go over and pet it. Mom's going to be nearby and swat your head off.
Yeah, well, yeah. And so, people over there, if you see a young one, stay clear from it. They look like they're not there, but I'll tell you what, the parents are close by. And they move fast, so be careful.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, they hear very fast. We're talking over 40 miles an hour. Zoom, they're there. One thing we should bring up safety-wise that we mentioned at the beginning of the top of the show was people feeding them. And you don't actually have to know that there's Bigfoot in your area or be setting out to feed them in order to be feeding Bigfoot. And I got to let you guys know, I've heard a bunch of times from different people that have contacted me that, well, we didn't know there was any Bigfoot around here. We were just leaving all our scraps out for the local animals to eat. Figuring all like little raccoons and stuff be coming up eating all their scraps. And now all of a sudden they got Bigfoot eating their scraps, and Bigfoot gets mad when they're not leaving them. So just really be careful with that. Leaving scraps of food for animals to eat, not a good idea.
Yeah, just don't leave it anything, it needs to go back deep into the woods, and there's food out there for it, Once you start feeding it, that's when they're going to constantly come back and people, why is it coming? Are you leaving food out for it? Stop doing that.
Yeah.
And that way it can go elsewhere.
If you don't feed them to start with, then you don't have to put up with the temper tantrum that you're going to have when you stop feeding them.
Oh, yeah. That's so true. No telling what they'll do other than turning things over,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You change something in your routine that they don't like, they're going to let you know about it. Could be very destructive to your livestock and property, or even you.
Yep. So true. So be careful. Be careful. So careful out there.
Yeah, safety first, last, and always, right? Well, is there any other recent stories that you wanted to cover? Because, honestly, we could go on for just hours. You probably got enough to cover 15, 20 hours to the point you couldn't even talk anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why it's great to have you on, because, I could have you on every 3 months or so, and you can tell us all the new stuff that happened and cover a few old stories, and you'll never run out.
Oh, yeah. There's some. As a matter of fact, I'll share. I don't know if I shared this one with you the last time, but there was two families that on two separate occasions were last September. Say August and September. August, they were out pinon picking out in the mountains, and the family, they had family there, and they had some kids there, and they were all just picking piñons. And all of a sudden, I guess, I don't know if the little girl kind of walked off or exactly what had happened, but they were all picking piñons, and I believe they must have heard the girl scream or something.
Oh, geez.
And they said that, according to the gentleman that contacted me, he said that the Bigfoot tried to take off with the little girl. They grabbed her, and if I'm not mistaken, they said this thing was trying to grab her, and they pulled her back, and they got her, and this thing took off. They said they got a good look at it, and they said this thing tried to take off with the little girl. That one was back in August of last year when they were piñon picking, and they said they went to the police department to report it, and the gentleman was so upset with them because they got told, don't shoot it, just leave it alone. And the gentleman was like, so you guys know that these things are out here, right? I mean, aren't you guys going to do anything about this? I mean, this thing tried to take my little girl.
Yeah.
And we grabbed her, we pulled her back, and they just got told, don't bother and don't shoot at it. And, again, so you guys do know that these things are out there. You guys need to inform the people, which is true, why hide it? Everybody knows about it. Everybody sees it. They smell it,
Why keep lying about it?
Yeah, why? If you guys know, the people need to be warned about it. Something needs to be said about it, and I told the gentleman, I said, yes, keep an eye on the kids, have them be, because these things, they'll just snag them quick, and, you don't know if you'll ever find them again. There was another incident about, I believe, a month later in September, a different family. They were out piñon picking, and they said that the Bigfoot tried to take off with one of their kids again. With this other set of family. So, I told them, I said, you guys got to be really careful out there. Why they're not telling you guys, the cops are not telling, I just don't understand it. But get the word out, and you guys be so very careful out there, because they are watching. And when you take your eyes off your kids, that's the time they'll take them quick. I said, you won't believe how fast they move. I said, they're quiet. They come, they'll sneak up on you very quietly, too.
Yeah.
As big as they are, so be careful.
This could have been easily repeated here recently, and I don't know if you caught episode 44 where I did an interview with Claudia Akeley. And she was out walking with her two daughters, and they ran into a big one and two little ones. And they actually got on video and everything, went back and reported it to forestry, and forestry said, you saw a bear. And she said, look, I got a video. No, you saw a bear. Okay, I'm suing you. And so she's suing the state of California for recognition of Bigfoot. And it's going to take some more people with guts like this to launch lawsuits on these jerks in order to get them to finally admit that we've got something going on and take reasonable measures to protect the public safety. Like, at least let us frickin' know that they're there.
Oh, yeah. It's true. Why, my concern, is, yes, for all the people out there, even big people that research these, that have the big names, you guys, from time to time, again, I always say, I don't care how much money you have, how famous you are. Those items are not going to save your life if this thing attacks you. Mm-hmm. Be careful out there, even you cops out there, rangers.
And Bigfoot doesn't know you're famous. Bigfoot doesn't know you're famous, and if he did know, he wouldn't care.
That's right. It's true, everybody out there, young and old, be careful. I don't care how experienced you are, you've got to be careful. Yeah. And I know a lot of, people like, I don't care what she says. She doesn't know what she's talking about. All I'm going to say to you is just be careful. Goes back down to be careful. Watch out. The smallest mistake could cost you something big.
Yeah.
don't know. We don't know. We are all looking for the exact same thing. We're all researching pretty much the same way. Some groups have all the nice gadgets. Some don't. Doesn't matter what kind of gadgets you have, the most expensive cameras or whatever you have, flashlights, doesn't matter. Those are items are not going to save you if this thing comes and attacks you. Be careful. My main words to all of you out there, beginners, you beginners that want to get into this, be careful. Don't go in it thinking there's something big, because you're not. I'm not. I don't look at myself as I'm a hot shot. I will never say that. Not on the radio show. I'm just an ordinary person just like you, and I'm just trying to get the word out. Be careful. Be safe out there. And, I don't want to hear something happen to you. This could have been prevented if we did this, if we did that. Just be really careful out there. That's my main message.
Right on.
Be safe.
Yeah. Knowledge is power. Know more about the possible hazards. Avoid.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on. I always enjoy being on the shows and getting the word out of what's going on, out here on the reservations, different part of the reservations, on and off the reservations. There's so much things going on. Lately, people are, how come you haven't posted this, haven't posted that? And I am so far behind on my stuff. I'm going to be posting almost one after another here within the next week. And I've just been having lots of issues on my phone, on my laptop's been freezing up. So I think I got all of that cleared up finally, hopefully. And now I'm just going to start posting like crazy. So you guys can look out for all of my stuff. So
great timing. This show will come out and everybody will have new stuff to go look at.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And people always ask, we can't find your team page. It's under New Mexico Shadow Seekers. I have it under as a secret group. So if you want to friend me, then I can add you to the group. The reason why I set it up that way is because I get a lot of hackers. So I try to be really careful in who I put in, into the group. You know how that is, people hacking stuff. So
yeah,
I try to be careful with that. So if you're wondering, you can't find it, friend me, and I will add you to the New Mexico Shadow Seekers page. That's where I'll be posting a lot here within the next week.
Right on. And I heavily recommend Brenda's Facebook group. It's an excellent one. Definitely go there, check it out, you guys. And thanks again for coming on the show. I'm glad that I've got multiple people down there, you being one of them, to actually come on the show and talk about what's going on down there. Because, my God, there's a ton going on down in the Southwest all the time. People think, it's all deserts and canyons, and so there couldn't be any Bigfoot down there. Oh, my God, it's just the opposite. The place is apparently crawling with them. They're all over the place. Help! It's like here we are in the mountains and the forest, and there's less Bigfoot sightings here than there is down there. Anyway, thanks again for coming on the show, and we will have you on again soon. And the crowd went wild. Woohoo.
So make sure that you're kind to everyone. Safety first, last, and always. Pay it forward. Don't be mean to people if you don't have to be. Don't flip off the mountain giant. Don't poke Dogman with a stick. Don't punt the puck, would you? And for God's sake, whatever you do not hug the Wookiee.